So yeah, I wanted to talk about Clive, which does relate to you. And recording this kind of video is a psychopathic act, really. The hair, first of all, the music going on in the background, um, and the fact that I'm talking to you is pretty fucking weird. Um, but no harm, no foul. And I think what's really interesting is to talk about Clive, and that relates to me and to you and to loads of other people in my family. And yeah, I think it's fucking crazy, really. But anyway, let's give it a go. Our family. So always good to take notes. Um, I guess I feel like I am at the point of no return.
This is present-day Belgrade, a thriving city with nearly 2 million inhabitants, several 100,000 cars, 10 prominent museums, several radio stations, a modern television facility, and one major football team.
Last time I listened to that, I was really intrigued with that idea as the female interface voice for the game, as suggested by Ella, possibly played by Ella, and how that could. In the moment, I felt like we could possibly get it so that as Clive starts to actually speak later on, nearly towards the end, really, he speaks with a woman's voice and get Neil to perform it. I think there was different ways of swapping those around, like Neil playing to uh, her performance, watching a video of whoever the female voice is saying the speeches, because there's basically two big speeches towards the end, um, or big kind of like dialogue scenes. They're not really speeches. Well, one is because it's as a game show host, as a sort of talk show host or a performer. It's meant to also be a game show host, but it's all a bit of a mess, all of that at the moment. And obviously, we've got the resolution clips, which is Clive revealing of Clive's story over 6 or 7 clips. And now is the sort of final chance, the point of no return, by which we have to make some sort of decisions due to what's happening in the game. And it could mean a tighter melding of what's happening in the the interface, the way that that is presented, and the way that Clive is presented in that, and how that possibly Clive becomes, he just kind of like emerges every now and then from the interface in a way. So it doesn't feel like you're going, oh, right, into a bunch of film clips. It retains the style and keeps telling the story in the style of the interface, which I think could be massive for us, really. It's very sort of, it's just getting a really nice style for that isn't like, obviously, I don't think we're going to do 3D, like photocopy black and white video of Neil and Clive and what is going on, and that sort of bleeding into the interface, albeit in black and white style. So that is something, that is one thing that's sort of going on in terms of trying to figure that out. Well, that is quite Freudian, me going down the rabbit hole like that to myself. So now I'm more focused on telling it to you. There is that stuff with the bleeding of the interface and Clive and the res clips and Clive's story and the Clive situation. But then, yeah, there's the thing of like Clive as a person, possibly trying to get him operating with operating with some major kind of inner conflict as like inner conflict as dichotomies and kind of opposites within the self. And that, I think it's a really magical idea, that. So yeah, if he is a boy, he's got a slightly older brother and a mum and a dad, lives in the countryside. It's like early 70s and it's frosty and he is he's on a frozen piece of water, could be at the bottom of a hill or something, just to sort of dip in the countryside. There's this massive kind of mini frozen lake. And you see Clive, and maybe you don't see it, but basically Clive is there with his brother, and his brother is slightly cruel, and Clive wants to impress, and the big brother kicks the red ball, kicks Clive's red ball onto the frozen lake. They've been playing around on it anyway, on the edges, but not quite in the middle. And he kicks it out into the middle and tells Clive to go and get the ball, which Clive does. And he goes to fetch the ball for his brother, who's kicked out there. And the ice cracks and he goes under the water, and it's quite deep. And he goes through a hole in the ice and he can't get up. He can't get out of the ice. He's under the ice, and he's the red ball is there and it's sort of floating around, but he's upside down in grey water, and he can see kind of moving around, or he can see the sky, but he can't find the hole. He can't find the way to go back. And I think that's the crux of what's happening there, which maybe we haven't really captured yet. In the end, he hammers the ice and keeps hammering the ice, and it cracks and breaks, and he sort of floats through it, and he's near the edge, and he just gets out. And as he gets out, his brother is kind of running away, like completely, like insanely terrified, and his mum is running from the other direction towards him with like this kind of crazy fucking shocked look on her face, as if she thinks that he's dead, and she cannot believe her eyes that he is alive. But he's just standing there like a small kid in his sort of clothes, really wet clothes. He's shivering. It's really fucking cold. He barely knows what's happened, but it's his normality to be alive. It's no, it would be weird if he was dead. So that's kind of the way it should be, and the red ball is at his feet. But that's what happens. I've never really sort of discussed it through like that. So it's obviously it's fucking working. So that is something that has happened. We kind of first meet Clive, and we're looking from his point of view, pajamaed hands, and he's making these cardboard things into little people, and he's sort of lining them up and he's asking them questions. And Clive's voice is on the top of it. It's like he's kind of very gently remembering this moment, but from later on. He's voicing it later on, but he's kind of in the moment of this kind of boy who is in bed. He's, it's really dark. It looks like he's been there for fucking ages. And you can hear just like loads of shouting from downstairs. His mum and his dad just kind of completely losing their shit with each other. And he's just there, really just making these things, making these kind of little characters. And then we don't see much of Clive for a long time. And you sort of fast forward maybe 15, 20 years, and he's a younger man, and he's lying near the canal, and he is seeing faces in the sky, and he's seeing his reflection in the water. And that ties into you helping characters resolve in the game. You've done probably 2 at this point. And so he's next to the water. It'd be nice at some point to see something from his brother. I think like obviously he's a bit kind of vacant, and it's maybe a sort of steer towards Clive doing nothing really. But I think we need to know like what has happened to the people to Clive and the people in his life, or do we not? Do we not know that, and we just see Clive on his own? And that was the kind of birthing before. Like the thing is, you at this stage you don't know about him going under the ice, and it's you've seen the inventing of the characters as a boy and heard the trouble from the parents down below, and it's not a very nice scene, but the characters are kind of funny, and Clive is spirited in it. And then you fast forward through to him being a younger man, and lying around, being lazy, maybe talking to his brother, but he doesn't send it to his brother. And then we're resolving the character. So you in the game show that you're playing, the crazy video game that you're playing, you are freeing characters who are imprisoned by Clive and Clive's show. Clive has this show and he's got these characters in prison, and you're kind of freeing them, which seems to be the name of the game, the aim of the game. And Clive is really pissed off with you in that environment. So you've got this Clive narrative unfolding in between you fixing things for characters in the game who are all versions of Clive, played by the same actor. And you are resolving those. And then there's this kind of, Clive in the environment there is like very sarcastic game show host, possibly with some inflections in some weird directions, but this needs to tie in more, perhaps, the res clips. Then in the res clips, he's watching daytime TV. He is watching baptism. That's all that's really happening. And if you could kind of set up an instant family scene that can be dashed later, actually, that would work a little bit better. Sort of like, hi, honey, hey, kids, kind of thing. to then just like obliterate that a little bit later, which will give just a little bit more what's going on in Clive's story here, as he's kind of out of his head and watching daytime TV, and all this stuff is happening around him. He's very disassociated, which would be good. Might want to introduce more kind of drugs into the canal scene previously. So we've had the canal, we've had the inventing of the characters, the canal scene, where he's talking to his brother in a memo that never gets sent, or like a postcard that never gets sent. Then he is with the family, watching daytime TV and just not engaging with anybody. And then Clive is on the streets of the city in the rain, and people are shocked by his appearance. Maybe he's wearing no top or something. He is angry, looking like a complete fucking nutter. He's having a psychotic episode for sure, and we want him to end up in front of a bunch of screens in a shop window, and the screens reflecting back to him, and then obviously with the Rez character, the third person RPX. But I wonder what's the story here. What's the story is that he has, well, that's the end of the family. I mean, even if it's just as simple as that, and he's out and away and mad, then something is going to happen. So it's kind of building, just like teasing that tension out, I think. And then the scene after that is in a police station, which I was also then going to, because we had the idea of maybe Hall of Mirrors, Lady from Shanghai, or like two-way mirror, police people looking through at Clive, who's sitting there at the table with a cup of tea or a glass of water, and Clive then looks into the two-way mirror, sees himself, but then sees the other characters. And I guess maybe part of the sort of patina of stuff during these clips is the idea that the personas, the invented characters are in his life and are some source of comfort. But then there has to become a threat that they are going to leave, which has to impact on the Rez staff. Because then the idea is that Clive invents a TV game show inside his own head that the characters are in forever. They're trapped in that, so they can never leave. The characters he invented can never leave because he traps them from this conceit in his own head. But then you, as the player, are playing and freeing those characters. So you are the ultimate antagonist to Clive. He loves those characters. He absolutely fucking loves those characters. He diminishes them verbally, but he fucking loves them. And all their bullshit and all the stories that they tell themselves, which he hates. So yeah, there was the idea of mixing some of those scenes together and for brevity and upping the story. And I think, yeah, we want to see the characters as, I don't know how to mix the resolving characters, the resolving personas, and the idea that the way that he is interacting with those personas as he grows, as he lives his life. I think that's something we were missing. So that, and all then tying into So, like the bit where he gets in trouble is the city street or the police station, and then it's kind of trapping. So there's a risk maybe that Clive might go to prison, and maybe he does. Don't know if we even considered that at this stage, but he imprisons the characters whom he loves in his own head, and you are freeing them because they want to be free and they deserve to be free if they want to be free, if they want to be. So that's along the end. That's just as you're sort of resolving the final characters, you realise that Clive is a pretty fucked up character and he's imprisoned these characters, and you've nearly freed them all. But then you find out why Clive invented the characters and why he got so fucked up. Really, it was a near-death experience that he had as a boy, which is recounted in those startling visuals that I described to you. But he is kind of like he is maybe sometimes in the mirror, sometimes not, but on stage as the game show host with a smart, I reckon, purple shiny jacket, roughly sort of white shirt, maybe a bow tie, a pretty slicked, recognizable haircut, catchphrase or two, and a lot of front, but hopefully we like him. Why would we like him at this stage? He's been through a lot. Don't know. Maybe we don't quite like him yet, but he's got something going on, and he's kind of like starting to become his person. I mean, maybe he could have the voice going from female to male, Neil, or the other way around, fading as you play with it or something. I don't know, maybe that's bullshit. I think it possibly is. But then we also have like the ending happens after that. So you kind of make your choice, I guess, depending on where you're up to. You've probably got a persona or two left in the running. You've got Clive left in the running. There might be more than one version of Clive in the running. And you have to either decide who wins and who fails and possibly who stays behind, or you play to determine that. And you maybe pick one who you want to get through, and then they go through or they don't go through, and there are ensuing results, ensuing narrative conclusions. I think so. There's the guilt of him because his brother goes away. So in a way, he's kind of like the young mind can take all that on to feel like it was their fault. That he split up the family. His brother got sent away, and he split up the family. His brother got sent away, and the family split, and he believes it was all his fault. And the dichotomy is that he really wants that family and that support and that love, but his actions push people away and make it impossible for people to love him. So how he resolves, that's really difficult. It's really difficult for me because I don't really think I have had a moral compass that was trustworthy at all. But I think I might be onto something right now, and I think that this the crux of this Clive story for me, I think, is something that I have to make. I have to make it really emotionally correct for me, and I have to accept it, and I have to put a lot of love into it, and that's it's not the way I would normally work, but I think I can do it, and I think it will really make it a great story. I think, you know, I think we've got to be really careful because the characters in the game, in the gameplay, are a bit fucking boring. They're all a bit like a tiny bunch of fucking dicks, but they're quite likable as well. But you've got to kind of give that a really good context and make a lot more happen with Clive, the character. Clive is a good guy, but Clive is a good guy, and you're a good guy. Clive is a good guy. Okay, well, thanks for listening. It is appreciated. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was to sort of explore where we came from or where we're at in terms of the game show within the game, Clive's game show, and yeah, where that's sort of up to and how that sort of fits culturally and with our game and stuff. I mean, I originally, probably just like you, or for many years was very much in opposition to kind of reality TV. Before that, kind of game shows were not really, since I was a kid, were they something I was very interested in. I used to quite like them when I was a kid, although my family as a boy, we weren't allowed to watch ITV commercial channels. We were only allowed to watch the BBC because supposedly it was funded by the nation and had better values, which may or may not be true, and may have been because parents didn't want us watching adverts because we might want stuff, which is fair enough. I totally get that, but I think, yeah, I mean, just sort of finishing that point. I when kids at school when I was about 8 used to say "come on down" and sort of refrain stuff from shows that they watched on TV. I had no idea what they were talking about, and then it became something that I was kind of obsessively wanted to see because I wasn't allowed to see it. The Price is Right, the game show. Come on down. Yeah, that was just an aside, but I think more recently I've really got into reality TV, and yeah, I find it quite fascinating, and it is a real kind of insight into the world and the people in the world and what people want and aspire to in a modern context, for good or bad, really. I think there's all sorts. Obviously, there's all sorts of reality shows, competitive shows. I certainly got a lot out of the travel shows like Race Across the World recently because that's travel broadens the mind, doesn't it? It's not like people become more of an asshole the more they travel. I think that the opposite is true, and watching people travel is really interesting, and the competitive element gives it that je ne sais quoi. But then by the same token, I've also been watching reality dating shows, competitive dating shows. And it's just, I guess, it's nice to shout at the TV sometimes. Yeah. And then when I was developing Clive as a Good Guy back in its original form, the idea of the mirror gag and trying to think about gamifying dialogue and the idea of a reality show being a sort of frame of context for the mirror gag, which was the original kind of game show within Clive as a Good Guy. When there was no Clive, it was just the characters and that game, which still has a value, but I think we wanted to broaden it out and tell a deeper sort of story. So we expanded to understand whose head these characters were all in. That character being Clive, and Clive has put them into this competitive show, which they can't get out of, but somehow you, as the gamer, you come in and you start saving these people, much to Clive's annoyance, because for him, he wants to keep them exactly where they are, which is trapped in his own head. He doesn't want to have their own lives in any way. And I guess when I was sort of developing those original gags, which is these kind of gamified dialogues, hoping to sort of push kind of video-based games forward away from these kind of large, chunking, branching narrative type of FMV games, which some of which are great, a lot of which are just really boring. I mean, they'd be boring if they were a film, and they're even more boring if they're asking you to interact with a film that's boring. It's tedium. So the idea of gamifying the dialogue at a more granular level is obviously something I've talked about a lot on these kind of sessions and in the background materials to the game. And immediately reality TV like Battle Royale, like Down to One, became a frame of reference for that. I think we tried a lot of different things, and to get the gags working properly, we've ended up kind of doing somewhat like a sort of top trumps game with the gags and the characters, like a cards trumps based game. But then now we're inventing the frame of the game show around that. And it's not really a reality show, because we want more of the trappings of the game, I think. And kind of understanding a lot of stuff that's in reality shows is kind of unsaid or unsignaled, whereas game shows, everything is signaled and everything is introduced and paid off and visualized. And we want that within the game really to help the gamification of the dialogues, the gags to work. I mean, they definitely work, but making that more of an exciting experience, I think the game elements, are going to help that, and that's kind of reverting back to game shows of old. And it's interesting to do research on that stuff. Looking at like the early days of game shows, quiz shows in America on American TV. Obviously, we got quite a lot coming over here from the early days onwards, and then the UK has produced some kind of juggernaut type of game shows and reality shows in response as well. But yeah, I think we're kind of looking at game shows and the trappings of those shows. And we've been experimenting with having Clive as a host for these shows, which not quite sure whether we need somebody else as well, like an interface character, or whether we just have Clive in his kind of cross between a sort of traditional game show host and an angry person. Potentially, we're sort of experimenting with that and trying to get the tone right, because more than anything, it needs to be right. So I think those trappings of the game within our overall game are more like game shows. The dialogues from the characters are much more like the pleadings of reality show characters, kind of emotional, like a little bit over the top emotional, often talking about people that we don't know, and their dreams and what kind of winning means to them and their significant others. Is that's the kind of trappings of reality where people are kind of pressing sympathy buttons or being honest, depending on your point of view. It's kind of interesting that we have this kind of like multi-part thing coming together of like with the gamified dialogues, that being a bit like reality TV dialogues, and then having the game show trappings of the game, and with a host as well, Clive. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of mix, and game shows and reality shows. There's loads of good stuff out there, and it's interesting that it reflects the general kind of urges of people, everyday people, to kind of play a game or play along with a game and watch people like themselves winning and losing, whether it be a toaster or $1 million. It's really fascinating. I mean, the other one that's been quite interesting recently is the Squid Game challenge, of which the last episode drops today on Netflix. I mean, that's bound to be an anticlimax. Most of the reality show sort of climaxes are very anticlimactic, which is interesting in itself. But the Squid Game, obviously taking the fake fictional reality show from a fictional drama and making a real competitive reality game show out of that. I wouldn't have expected that to win in a million years, but it was really good. And the last episode drops tonight. That'll probably be an anticlimax like every other reality show climax. But yeah, it's been really interesting to watch that, the Squid Game fiction becoming the Squid Game reality. It's been absolutely fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it. And I would recommend it. But yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about TV and reality other than, I mean, soon, Clive is a good guy.